Hi. Like we mentioned last week, we are going to focus on emotional and verbal abuse this week. And both of them are actually two separate things, but because of my inability to navigate or decipher between the two as far as how they affected me and the healing in my life from each one, I'm going to include them together. I am going to include in the posts and some of the videos on the comments, if you'll look, what each one is defined as and how, and some of the things that are connected to them. But I am going to tell you a little bit about my perspective and how it affected me, especially as a child right now. Just as a side note, I want you to understand that just because someone speaks a certain way or does says certain things or maybe how they say something does not ultimately mean that they are abusers. There are contexts to these. And usually things turn into emotional or verbal abuse because it's consistent. There's no conversation that can be had. You're coerced into thinking that it's all your fault. There's manipulation involved. There can be ignoring or stonewalling. There is some sort of consequence for the conversation. So, and I'm thinking of like a couple of times when people sometimes sign up for some aspects of this, like personal trainers at times. And I'm not saying all personal trainers are that way, but I know sometimes people sign up for that, or military or something like that, that maybe there's more of an understanding of what you're stepping into versus growing up with it and not really having a choice, or possibly being in a marriage or a relationship that is this way. That usually comes from a history of not knowing that it wasn't something you shouldn't have accepted. So, this one was hard because I realized last night is when I realized what was so hard about it and why I was having a hard time coming up with information, was because I still realized I struggle with the result of it. I still see myself as weak for being affected. And I know it comes, I'm guessing it comes with that stigma, but I feel like, don't be so sensitive, or people were just joking, they didn't mean it, or suck it up, or whatever wording was used over the years. I guess I'm still struggling with the reality that I still do think it's weak for me to have been affected by other people's words. But one of the ways I found that the words had affected me is because I realized the things that I have said have affected others. So when I guess maybe that was one of the first steps in healing, was recognizing that I hurt others with my words. So if I can do that, then maybe it has been done. So, emotional abuse is different from physical abuse because you don't immediately see the results. It can take years, or it's hard to pinpoint. It's hard to say, is that why that you feel that way? Or it's just sort of seems non-fluid. So because of that, I'm going to give you just how I felt that it affected me. And I'm using the word felt because I'm going to use more feelings in the emotional and more words, to express the verbal aspect of it. But I am going to try to focus on the emotion of it as much as I can, even though I still find myself disassociating with emotions in many ways. So Uh, and I also, just as a side note, I notice that it's harder to understand how your words affect people, also because of social media, because there's a tendency not to have to own what you say and how it affects other people, because you're not standing in front of them and you don't see the hurt in their face, or you don't hear the anger, or you don't feel anything. It's just words on a piece of paper or on a screen, and it doesn't seem to mean anything, but it does. And that's hard. That's been hard for me to, honestly, like the hardest part is to not say anything. Like I feel the pressure sometimes to say things, but in the end, why would anybody care what I thought any more than caring what anybody else thought about something that's going on in my own life? I tell people sometimes that I call that a drive-by opinion, because it's like a drive-by. They just drop or shoot out all this information and then they move on and they're fine. But you're stuck with whatever word bullets pierced you. And then what do you do with that? So as a child, getting to it, as a child, I did go through emotional and verbal abuse, and I'm going to share my journey and how it ultimately affected me. And while I understand how I responded and how it affected me does not happen that way for everyone, I can only tell you my own personal experience and list a few things that I believed happened as a result of this. I felt like my feelings never mattered. I believed that I gauged my emotions on where other people's emotions were. I felt responsible for how other people felt, but began to not feel responsible for what I felt. To this day, I struggle with disassociating, like I said, from my own emotions, and I will go into that later this week. I spent a lot of time feeling small, scared, and unwanted, which caused anxiety that I didn't even know I had until about 5 years ago. And I'll also talk about that more. And that anxiety for me looked like, I don't know, it kind of looked like I was scared what people were going to say. I tried to feel the room and then try to keep it there. I didn't want to stand out. I didn't want anyone to notice me. I didn't want to say anything that was that would change the mood or anything. Unless the mood was bad, then I just wanted to leave. I was very gullible and very, very literal. So if I was told something, I did actually believe it, which is odd since, like I told you from the last time, I lied a lot, but I assumed that no one else did, that I was the only one that was doing it. I was always surprised if someone lied to me, because I thought that I was the alien, the weird one. And I was the only one that was actually doing the lying. And I also, the literal aspect of it, people would explain something to me, and this still happens to me. So if you know me, you probably know this. Now you're going to know a secret. I take things literal. I still do. So if you say something and I respond, a lot of times people think I'm being sarcastic, but really it's because I did believe, like I really didn't know that you weren't being literal. It was figurative or it was a joke. So I do still struggle with that to some degree. And I'm starting to wonder if it's a struggle or if it's okay. Like, I don't know. I'm still navigating through that itself. I learned how to keep secrets very well, which nowadays doesn't hurt too bad since I'm a counselor. It just made more sense, because if I ever told anyone what was going on, I caused trouble, and I was told that I wasn't telling the whole story, and like that I was awful or I was difficult. And so I decided that because people tended to want a way out of listening to a kid who is being abused, they want a way out. They do not want to like tell the cops or tell anybody. I've noticed. And even in the field that I work in now, I find myself also like, that's hard because you want to be right. Like, you want to make sure that it's really happening. But that's not really your job. It's just your job to make sure that it isn't. And I know that kids don't always tell the truth, and I know it's not always that way, but that doesn't diminish the fact that sometimes it is. There are signs, and so we'll talk about those too, so that maybe you can be, so maybe I can help you find ways of helping if you struggle with knowing if it's real or not. But I just decided to start keeping it a secret because I did tell a policeman one time, and it scared me too bad because I was going to go home after. And then one time I told a teacher, and the teacher told me that it was probably because I was a rebellious kid, because I was there. So, and then I remember telling someone else in our neighborhood, and they didn't do anything. They said they would, but they never ended up doing anything. A lot of people promised to do something or said that they were going to do something, but they did nothing. So I decided to keep it a secret after that. It was easier than talking about it because I wasn't really believed anyway. I lived in a state of confusion because many people would say one thing but be something else. I learned that your word didn't really matter, especially if someone makes you mad. So if someone makes you mad, then it's okay that your morality goes out the window, which I am not saying that that's true. I'm saying that's what I had learned. And what's interesting is I still see that in people now. I was self-centered in many ways, which is kind of normal for a kid, I guess, because I felt I had to constantly prove myself. I didn't know the meaning of letting something go or backing down because I was being shown the hypocrisy of words. They mean something when I was told they did mean something, but meant nothing when they caused anything but action from me. And what I mean is if there was aggression or if there was some sort of consequence or yelling or verbal abuse or anything like that, if it didn't cause me to do what they wanted me to do, then the words had no meaning. Like, it didn't matter if it affected me or not, because there was only an action that they were looking for from it. I struggled with rejection and abandonment issues from being left at a young age. When I reached out to the person who left, it was either the wrong time or there was really nothing that they could do. So I stopped reaching out and assumed that I was unwanted because it was either the wrong time or, they couldn't do anything. And it felt like, if I wasn't going to be saved from this. I had moments of losing it, and I'll say that, losing it, where I would act out, whether it was screaming or running around or cussing or hitting or laughing or crying hysterically, or there was some sort of action. I even got into physical altercations with different people, even as a child, like in high school. Sometimes I would act this way in friends or in school, and that does not usually go well, especially when I normally did nothing. So, that made sure I was never a teacher's pet, or I was never someone that people liked the best, because I was odd. I was an odd kid. While there are probably a few other things that affected me because of emotional or verbal abuse, I'm going to stop there. And I'm going to ask you each to share your personal experiences. Please share. I will then answer any questions or comments. And on that note, I'd also like to say thank you so much for all the instant messages, the private messages, the emails, the text messages. I am just blown away by your compassion, for your desire to share, for the healing that I can tell is already taking place. So thank you so much. We will continue this post with how emotional and verbal abuse affected me later in years. Same thing. We'll go over the parent, friend, employee, and just generally as a person. And at the end of this week, I will discuss how healing took place and what changes have been made and which ones are still in the process of being made. And I will continue to be as open and as honest as possible to share in this process of healing. So I just want to say thank you for reading this. Thank you for listening to this and helping me and others pay it forward. Thank you.